Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, they're all right, you know. I like the theme of these cards. No, I like the design of these cards. Get gold, draw a card, make might tokens. That's pretty good. This, I really like this. And re-equip stuff we play. Hi, I'm Steelfur Speaks podcast. I'm trying to get back to a regular cadence of the podcast. Tuesday evenings in the UK, 7 p.m. station time. Though some of you, I do travel quite frequently. In fact, so frequently that today I forgot that I was traveling to work tomorrow until I was on a call at 2 o'clock this afternoon where I was speaking to my boss and he said, well, you come into a face-to-face meeting tomorrow. I said, cool, let me put that in my calendar. And then I went to my calendar and I realized that I have plane tickets for Philadelphia, go to a meeting tomorrow, not tomorrow, meetings on in Philadelphia. So I am in fact on the road yet again, having been in Orlando recently, having um and of course Belgium, various other places. But I am on the road again, and none of those trips are for Fab. A shame. Such a shame. But in this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about. Obviously, very excited for my boy Zen, the hero, more blue focused. Obviously, very excited for all of these transcend cards. Less excited for this. Cool. Obviously, super excited for these. You know, Legend of the Five Rings. Japanese style art is very well known, and I think some of these pieces hold for gorgeous pieces of art that we've seen Fab ever. So it's this. I mean, definitely just wins the biscuit. Takes the biscuit, wins the cake. Some sort of analogy for the best piece of Fab art seen. You know, it evokes Ghibli and it with that kind of fun side of Japanese spirituality where spirits and all of them are scary and all of them are super serious. Some of them are a bit weird. And also we have, I think, worth acknowledging this one as well, which I really like. We've got this Bakemono, this little demon, just overloading that tray of onigiri with one too many. So technically it's a gift, but it's not really a gift, is it? It's punishment. I think my favorite one so far, which is just entirely fueled by that, is just sort of landscape art. Is this one? I know what this is, but it just gives something go again. And I should be playing this in Ninja. Pretty exciting to see, but I like the art. I like the framing of this person on their way on a journey into the spirit, because Torii arches are the foundation of the gateway between the spiritual and I came back from Japan. I was in Japan for 3 weeks. And it's just worth noting, I mean, I have a degree in theology and um most of my studies were focused on ethics. I wrote my thesis on determinism and moral responsibility. You know, it's a very the concept that humans are machines and there is no base random decision making matrix. Question of how your brain interacts with the world and the behaviors that humanity. And kind of like Calvinism, from the Christian side of things, you know, that deterministic approach to religion. You know, so I wrote my thesis on that. But one of the things that gave me and has given me appreciation for levels of spirituality in the world, despite being a very staunch atheist myself. You know, I do not in religion, though I do believe in religious practices, theology of religion. I don't believe in religion itself, but one of those things that has gifted me is that deep appreciation. We'll call them the sacred spaces in society and creation of beauty dedicated to those sacred spaces. So when I see things like this placed in, we'll say I consider it to be a good place, like the entryway to the spiritual, going through the Torii Arch, the entryway to the sacred only comes at the end of a long journey up this path. I view that as being meaningful and quite simple. You know, in the same way that, you know, there's lots of just symbology going in general. About stirring the pot, we're talking about the mix of cultures come together to the mythos world, and art has really. This isn't really, I mean, a podcast really about art and spirituality, but maybe it should be. Maybe I should talk more about art and facts, our view of cultural things. But anyway, things have been going well, haven't they, in the world? We've had obviously ProQuest callings. We've had Pro Tour LA happen since I did my last episode because I've just been. That was really fun. Obviously, Dromai has just Living Legend, which I'm super excited. I really want to the world without Dromai for a while. Because we will have an illusionist. I think that's very important. Like, we know illusionist is one of the designer's favorite classes. And also, to be fair, one of the like main counters to Guardian and Control in the game. So kind of makes sense to always have an illusionist. I mean, this class triangle here, illusionist, ninja, assassin, is basically how we understand the entire game of Fab when it's working at its peak in terms of design. We have the mid-range hero, the illusionist, which can go control, but is often just sort of sitting there in kind of a mid to late game sort of vibe. We have the assassin, which is more control, slower usually. Then we have the aggro, and you get that wonderful triangle. And I mean, people are always talking about a triangle in Fab, but that's because when Fab is operating perfectly, it does enter that triangle status. And I think that's really, really cool. So, you know, the assassin will beat the ninja, the illusionist will beat the assassin, and you can place ninja with K, or, you know, there's always different layers. You know, you can't always have these different you know, characteristics ascribed to every single hero, but you can kind of break things down into a triangle of most cases. What have I been playing? I've been playing Star Wars. um no, I went to a big 220 person Star Wars tournament, and that was really fun. If you haven't looked at Star Wars Unlimited, I would look it as kind of like the culmination, I would say, of Magic the Gathering style card game design in terms of a lot of its elements. You know, the split lanes will stop someone having creature dominance one like over the entire board. It gives you a chance to have creature dominance in other area of the board. The mana system where you draw 2 cards and you use one, incredibly refined. The only thing I think is potentially still tricky is like the tempo system and how those actions go forth. But it does stop a lot of blowout turns. It does really limit, you know, the crazy blue combo decks that you get in Magic. So I would look at that game if you're looking at like what does a modern TCG designed along the same lines of Magic look like. I think that is as close as you're ever going to get. But of course, Flesh and Blood has its issues and challenges. I think part of the challenges of Fab are now being revealed in more depth. And what I mean by that is that we are getting to a point where there are quite a lot of heroes in the game, and it becomes much harder for heroes to retire, rotate, earn Living Legend, because they come in and they're not particularly strong. And I've spoken about this before, but they come in and they're not particularly strong, and then they kind of monumentally climb and rise the second they get a boost in power, and then they go pretty quickly. And we have this idea that these heroes should only last for 6 months and then be gone. And I'm kind of I've reconciled myself to that as a player because LSS is doing a good job of keeping classes playable. You know, I don't think we've had a situation where there hasn't been a hero of a particular class for a long time. Though you could argue Dromai is not old Prism, New Prism is not old Prism. But I would say that now we've got the Angels and stuff like that. New Prism is starting to play a lot like old Prism in ways, and building board and using angels. It does feel a little bit like now that, you know, new Luminaris came out, that old Prism has been revived again. But what do I mean? I mean, like, there are a lot of legal heroes. And we've entered into this stage in Fab, which is fatiguing quite a few people. Just to be honest with it, I do think it is firmly fatiguing quite a few people. And what do I mean by that? I mean, okay, so you have, call it gem variance, because it's pretty common in, but not all card games, where basically you go to a tournament and there are 15 legal decks and you could play against any of them, and you're going to have, 60% matchups into some, 17 for others. And you kind of got to hope that your run, doesn't encounter the heroes that you're bad into. And you kind of play the game where you're like, well, I think there's going to be 60 of those and only 20 of those. And a lot of Kano matchups are like that, It is the correct decision to either be full in on Kano, as in I can beat him, or just to ignore him and hope you don't ever run into it. Right. So, we're in that kind of situation where you've got those matchups. And I would say, so coming from a background of a game like Legend of the Five Rings, for example. So those who don't know, Legend of the Five Rings was made up of 7 factions called clans. Those clans typically had one good deck per tournament competitive cycle. And typically those clans were not uniformly good into all the other clans, right? So your dragon might beat crab, but your crab might beat scorpion consistently, right? And therefore, every single tournament was always that gem lottery. You never got away from that because the way the game was designed, with so many legal factions, it was impossible to give everyone every good deck or every great deck, a good matchup into the entire field. And I'd argue even it became undesirable because if a deck was strong enough that it could beat the other 6 off, then that deck probably was too strong. And we've seen a bit of that in Fab where the best deck is like 80% of the field. I don't think it ever went that high, but maybe 60% of the field. That deck was proven to be just grossly better than the available options. So we don't want that. This state of desirability born from a broad range of heroes where you have to deal with having bad match is healthier for a game like that. And especially because if you think that Legend of the Five Rings had 7 factions, you could argue that Fab has 9 classes, but I wouldn't say that all of the classes play the same across all of them. It probably has about 12 or 13 factions. The idea that your deck is going to have a tier 0 matchup into faction is a bit weird, and I don't think it's necessarily, good. And I think if that deck emerged, I would like to see it banned. I'm much happier with the current situation. But I do want to acknowledge that it does create fatigue in some people. How do you deal with that? How do you we're just talking. How do you how do you process the fact that you now have to practice into all of these different decks, and how do you prioritize having the time practice into is leading? And I will say the advice from Legend of the Five Rings world, where they did this a lot, is just to pick your favorite. It's just your favorite of the best, right? So if there are 15 decks, look at the top 5 and pick your favorite. Look at the top 8 and pick your favorite, and just get reps into it, and then go to the tournaments and have fun with that hero and hope that it works out. I would really like to see one of the things Legend of the Five Rings did that rewarded that kind of dedication was giving prizes for the top ranked hero, the top ranked player on each faction at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, if you went to a pro tour and there was a nice prize for being the top ranked, like Riptide, for example, I think that would encourage a lot of people to stay on that hero and feel like they were engaged in that race to be the best of them, if not the best of everyone. So I think that might be something for Fab to. And I know they listen to it occasionally in years, so hopefully that's one that they'll consider. But that's just something to think about. This week's podcast is nature of multiple factions in the game, changing nature of as a competitive player. I think a lot of people who come from Magic the Gathering struggle with that because usually there's a top deck. There's a top deck that counters that. There's a third deck that does something that works against some of the other 2. And you don't usually have a 4th or a 5th deck because best deck is running the best cards, the second best deck is running the cards. You know, whereas in Fab, there is value in being the fifth or the sixth deck that approaches the game from a angle. It's one of the most enjoyable, I would say, design elements of the game is that nuance says, well, okay, yeah, you know, it's true. Viscerai is not the best deck in the format. On a what Hatchet here, but Viscerai into Guardian. I'm just talking, just throwing stuff out now. But but Viscerai into Guardian is quite good. So if you're expecting that loads of Guardians will come, the Runeblades, you can attack the meta way. And I think Fab is creating that narrative in a very powerful way. Now, the trade-off for that is an increased amount of variance in terms of gem, and also there is an increased amount of variance in how Fab is handling the game in terms of flash, in terms of wagering. Brian said in an interview, looking for micro moments, variance that provide fun and enjoyment, and those aha moments. And those can be a bit tricky, but they also make the game more fun. And arguably, I would say make the game more accessible. I was watching, what was it, a Flesh and Bloods podcast from a ago, Michael Fong, I think it's and he was saying, that he feels like the variance in the game is a double-edged sword, that it makes it less appealing to hyper competitive players, but makes it more accessible to more casual players. And I think that is a very, very true statement I want to highlight, which is that, we're in this situation where, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of the Pro Tours have been won by people who did not have a job at the time and who could dedicate significant blood. And I think that is desirable in that the person who is the most skilled and has the most reps should win. But I think the question is, of course, about the gap between starting from zero and where we get to. So if the gap is 2 months and 40 hours a week, that's too much. If the gap is 10 hours a week and 10 to 15 hours a week, and you can do it while you're doing your full-time job, or you've got a kid, or all these things, then we're in a good place. So we need people to do well at Fab when they invest the time, and that time investment needs to be reasonable. Gamers do not have the same amount of time that gamers had 10 to 15. Any way you look at it. Well, not the gamers playing the games that I play now, not the gamers listening to my podcast. They don't have the time they had 50. Kids playing Fortnite, sure. 20 hours a day to be the best Fortnite player, and thumbs. Really good thumbs. Get those Twitch reactions going. Sure. People playing World of Warcraft like I play World of Warcraft. People playing Final Fantasy, people playing Fab, people playing card games. They have as much time as they did 10, 15 years ago. You've got kids, you've got a full-time job, you've got a partner who wants attention, heaven forbid. Do you have the time to go completely hard on a card game and do it at the expense of everything? You don't. Like, let's just be honest, you don't. And then the question becomes, should you do that? Or should you be able to engage with it in a relaxed way, but still do reasonably well? And how should the game be designed? The World of Warcraft has found recently that actually, for their new season of Discovery, they just turned the knob on the XP from, I think from 1 to 40, it's 300%. From 40 to 50, it's plus 50%. So leveling takes half as much time as it did before. Or even like 6 times as fast at lower levels. People don't have as much time. And then they made the raid that came out, Sunken Temple, and it was really difficult, and they nerfed it, and then it was still difficult, and they nerfed it again. And then loads of people not loads of people, but some of the more serious players were like, why are you doing this? It's too easy. And he just correctly responded and said, look, you need to be able to clear our raid if you are a person who can only play a couple of hours a week, who has this level of gear, who just wants to get through, do the raid, and have fun. This is not a hard game. But if you want to challenge yourself, get the 100% rating, get the 100% pass. So we need a case in Fab for a game that is accessible to people playing less, but that still rewards the best person in play. And I firmly believe that to do that, we need more interesting prizes for people who do not win the game. And I think the example that I said of, prizes for the best in hero at the largest events, so Pro Tour, Worlds, maybe Callings, but I don't need it to be at everything, but give someone an incentive for showing up to the Pro Tour on Riptide, or beyond just a love of the hero. That's a good start. I think that also we have to face the facts that with the death of XP as a qualifier for nationals, door attendance in some places has fallen. Now, I did a survey on Twitter, got like 300 or 400 responses, and 40% of people said, no, game's still growing, but acknowledging, I think 15, 20% of people said, this has definitely happened. I've definitely had a drop off in attendance because XP is no longer relevant. I think that genuinely XP needs to be relevant, and there has to be a way and a milestone for playing the game, just playing the game. Now, you could turn around and say, but hey, playing the game is fun, so why don't I just play the game, and why won't people just play the game for fun? And the fact is that people are motivated by rewards, unfortunately. But they are, and fun itself is not just a reward, because maybe, look, today in London, for example, you can't hear it because I've got the microphone pretty well, and I'm in a room adding and things. There is a pretty large storm blowing up. And I'm obviously a bit nervous because I have to get on a plane tomorrow and I'm going to have to take off. But the wind is quite aggressive in the trees outside. And there is a draft blowing on the back of the old house. So the fact is that, like, people on a night like tonight, it's harder for me to go out to an armory because I can't walk there. I have to get the bus. If it was raining, I wouldn't be able to use an umbrella, all these things. And I don't have a lot of incentive to go if it's not a format I like as much. Like, now, maybe there's an argument that play because it's formats I want up, but it is just more difficult. And I think it's important to acknowledge the difficulty of fitting a hobby this intense into your regular life. And I think there should be rewards for going to events and playing and getting. And I think armories are good. There's usually a prize. I would really recommend that if one person just keeps winning your armory every single week and taking the prize, change your prize structure. Like, do not just allow that to happen. Just make it random. Give out the cost randomly. You can 100% that just change it. I've heard stories about some places where one person just every week. Like, you don't need to accept that, right? Divide it up a bit. Make it fairer to give people other reasons. But I genuinely, and my suggestion for this, and I really think it would be good, is I think the game should reward XP milestone with something, right? Now, in my head, it's like a challenge coin or like maybe a case for your hero that says how many, like, what your XP milestone is. Like, imagine if you got like a little plastic case for your hero and like it had a special border based on like an XP milestone. So you hit 3k XP, you get a little, silver border or something. And you could pick that up at a calling or a pro tour. Like, we've got to think about this level of kind of capstone or milestone rewards that give people a reason to continue collecting XP long term beyond just, playing the game. Because I think there is a tendency for attendance at armories to fall off when there isn't something online that you. And I know that, people played a lot to get 1k XP in their country, but that did, of course, fall off. They were no longer there so much, right? So, all of these things are a factor, but I just feel like, for me, I think the easiest win would be milestone reward. And, you have these people who've got 4,000, 5,000 who can go and collect the the gold, not gold, shiny challenge coin that they can use, something like that, to show off the fact that they're that engaged in the game. Could also do it based on matches played, something like that. Just these commemorative milestones to people for. And all games are doing it. They have battle passes, they have season passes. My level in my League of Legends account is 357. Not that it exists. I'm terrible at League of Legends, by the way. I have the reflexes of an old man with dyspraxia, because I'm 34 in 2 weeks and I have dyspraxia. So, I'm only bronze to low silver. Though I could argue I'm an ADC, so I could argue that with a good support, maybe I'm low gold. But my point is, I'm not good at League of Legends, but I've played it for so long and I have these skins and I have this level, and those things do mean something to me, right? They would give me a reason to play League of Legends over another game long term, right? Because I know my favorite heroes and my favorite skins. And I just think Fab is missing a little trick on that, where it could give these kind of rewards. I think that's a good thing. I'm going to start wrapping up there. I think this has been a nice rambly podcast. I've been listening a lot to the Blind Boy podcast. Anyone from Ireland might recognize that, but Blind Boy is a comedian / artist from Ireland, from Limerick, where I'm from, and he went to school down the road from me, kind of the same time I'm there, actually, same age. He basically has a podcast, and he used to do gigs and talk, but he's very interesting. Got a lot of studying of topics that I find very. But listen to his podcast, and he's been talking about the value of giving people a regular podcast hug. Audio is good. They can sit back. They can relax. And you give them some things to think about. My thing to think about is, how would you incentivize people to engage with Fab, to keep coming to armories once you've removed experience from qualifying for nationals, other tournaments? How would you encourage people to play less liked heroes at competitive events beyond just the aesthetic of the hero? What's methodology? And also just have a think about liking and subscribing to the podcast, because obviously I've been doing this for a couple of years now. It's good, it's bad. I quite enjoy doing it. I need to get back to a more cadence, which I will do because people appreciate that. But I'm hit 1,500 subscribers. A lot of that fueled by my monthly giveaways, which I started doing now. Check out those. Bit of fun. I have way too many playmats, so I'm giving some away. And yeah, it's still fun. Recording this podcast has its ups and downs, but it is still fun. I still enjoy sitting down, talking about Fab, half an hour a week. I still enjoy a lot of the, talking and things, and the way it lets me interact with the game from a perspective. I will say, so one project I did that I would like more attention to, if you're still listening, you've probably already seen it, but I have done this history of competitive Fab. It is really good. It breaks down first year of Flesh and Blood. I'm working on part 2, working on getting an interview done that I would like to put in there, but part 2 is almost done. And really what it is every competitive tournament, the end goal of the project, broken down with interviews with the winners, reviews of what was happening in the game and other things that were happening in the world that influenced it, and then deck text and stuff like that. And it should just be a go-to historical documentary style series on every year of Fab and how. Do watch that. It hasn't got that is the way of the world. They usually a bit of them on a video like that where I publish the second one, third one. YouTube will I'm okay with that. As always, thank you all for listening. Speak to you all and have a good one.